Hello, and welcome to episode 72 of Trails in the Pod. I'm Colin. That's Kevin.
What's the ideal pro bono ratio for hospitals? Is the for-profit model a good one for healthcare, tertiary healthcare in fictional fantasy settings? All of these thrilling topics and more we will discuss today as we tackle Back Alley Dr. Glenn, the novel of Trails from Zero.
I'm very curious to get your take on that because I don't feel as if the books actually let us talk about the ideal rate of pro bono work. But yeah, so we're talking about this novel, really short story as they all are. I have to say, just off the bat, I mean, we don't know how long this episode is going to be, right? Until it's done. But I don't see this episode being very long. What do you think?
I don't. For the other novels, I felt there was more immediate, at least to me, the uninitiated player, applicable connections to be drawn within the game the novel is in, within the wider outside world. The Dollmaker, Doll Knight, the Cornelian. I I don't get it here. And without going into spoilers, Colin, having played through most of the series, do you see it?
Well, I will say that in trying to Google the more significant parts of this book, I did come across a theory, a fan theory about the origins of Septium that uses this book as like pretty hardcore evidence for it. But I can't read it out loud on the podcast because it also pulls from stuff from like Trails of Cold Steel 3 and Azure and has some spoilers in there. So I won't be talking about it.
I bet then, just based off of that, the crystal or the toxin the tumor produces, the theory goes, somehow is connected to septium. Like maybe it's unrefined septium or something that could be turned into septium.
Well, maybe. I don't think any of these things have actually been confirmed in the game. I think that this crackpot theory was specifically claiming that the tumor is the same origin as you material, which is the kind of specialist crafty stuff that appears in this game. But I don't want to get too much into that because again, it relies on stuff from other games we haven't played. Kevin, why don't I start off with a bit of a plot summary so that our listeners have an idea of what this novel is about? And I've written one out, and then you can fill in the details that I missed.
What will you do with the other 59 seconds of your allotted minute?
Yeah, seriously. All right. So, first of all, Glenn is a back alley doctor who charges exorbitant fees to do underworld medicine. You know, people maybe they get into a gang fight and they're important, like they're a representative or something, and they get shot. So he will remove the bullets, but then charge a lot of money in order to keep things secret. One day, he's approached by a hot nurse who asks him to do real surgery because apparently people in Remiferia can run across a sickness that turns them into crystals. It'll start either in the feet or on the hands, and then within a month's time, it will spread throughout the whole body and kill you. It's revealed throughout all of this that Glenn had almost found a way to cure the disease without amputation because the right now the only way to stop it is to amputate the limb on which the crystallization appears. Right now, there's a violinist that if you were to do that, you'd cut off his hands. He couldn't play violin anymore. He used to have a girlfriend who was a ballerina, and then the crystallization started in her feet. And
Glenn, not Hugo.
no, Hugo's the violinist.
The violinist did not have the girlfriend.
Glenn had the girlfriend.
Yeah, you're saying he a lot about the violinist, and then he had a girlfriend.
Okay, look, I can't always keep my subjects and verbs straight, but whatever. I'm saying Glenn has a girlfriend who was a ballerina, who everybody was saying we need to amputate her legs in order to save her ability to be a ballerina, and he finds a potential cure, which is that there's a tumor in the heart that apparently causes the crystallization, and so he performs open heart surgery in order to save her in order to save his girlfriend, but fucks it up and kills her instead. That's why he runs away and becomes a back alley doctor. Now it's his turn at redemption uh, by saving this violinist. And at first he refuses, but the hot nurse guilts him into it. Then he is successful because apparently he's been doing research for the past decade on how to actually do this. And then it's revealed that the hot nurse is the sister of the ballerina he murdered. And then the story ends with them almost fucking, but they didn't fuck.
I don't know how to follow such a wonderful summary. I don't want to criticize Glenn, but never learning about your long-term significant other who you plan to marry. Oh, hey, do you have any siblings? I'd love to meet them. Never crossed his mind, apparently.
Well, no, he did. It does mention in the book that he and his colleague Rufus, who also loved the ballerina Katerina, they knew this hot nurse when she was a girl, but then he just never recognized her 10 years later.
I'll just move on beyond that. So, my initial thoughts were crystallization. I thought it would be somehow connected to the salt pillars of Northumbria. Emeryville is in the north. Northumbria is, as the name suggests, also in the north. It's not, as we read on. I don't think it's anything more than a passing similarity, if even that. That's where my mind went. Second was I was typing Northumbria into Google to make sure I got the spelling right, and it wanted to correct it to Northumbria. So I thought, oh, that must be where the name came from.
It's possible. Although sometimes there are weird names from like the classical past that get used. Like there's a town in Brittany that shares the same name with a town in Crossbell that I've now forgotten the name of. But anyway, doesn't matter. I have to say that
One more thing.
sure.
I played volleyball with someone in college whose name was Ambria, so that's that.
Kevin, I just learned yesterday that you had never heard of the name Estelle until you started playing Trails in the Sky.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
So you had no idea that Estelle was a real name, but you met somebody named Ambria.
Yes.
What is your life?
Very first night of college, we played volleyball.
It sounds like a sexy
But
thing.
you know who can't play volleyball?
This violinist because his hands are going to get amputated.
Yes. A couple I thought funny things that are tragic about the hospital. Patients deemed incurable were outsourced. That's how they got and kept that absurdly high cure rate. And I liked seeing that. I've noticed maybe a bit less now with Crossbell, but in general, the novels are a bit more cynical on society, on human nature than what we are presented with in the games. Maybe that's less with, Star Door 15, but people kill people in Cornelian. The hospital picking people out to keep its cure rate above 99%, that does not feel the tone of St. Ursula's.
I did not get the impression that these people were being outsourced by the hospital. Where are you
I
getting?
am literally quoting the novel. Patients deemed incurable were outsourced.
Okay, what chapter is that in?
Chapter 2. It was
Okay.
also a hospital. So this quote comes from chapter 2. And let me give a brief extended version because it does not portray them in a good light. It was also a hospital that was protective of its image. Patients deemed incurable were outsourced so as to not reflect poorly on the hospital's track record.
Okay, that is there. That's true. For you did not make it up. But I will say I don't think it has anything to do with Hugo because Hugo is curable.
Well, the cure was just a, hack and slash amputation.
Yes.
So,
And I want to talk about the philosophical implications of the story in a bit because I think it raises a good question about what it means to live. I have to say that I find that, okay, the material cause of crystallization, I think, is interesting because when we think crystals, we tend to think supernatural. In the real world, people don't turn into diamonds. We don't turn into crystals, or we don't turn into septium if this crackpot theory is true. Um, but here there is a literal physical cause. It's caused by a heart tumor, in the body that can be operated upon, that can be removed. I like this concept because it's taking things that appear to be outside the realm of human understanding and giving them material elements to make them understandable. Now, I don't quite know how a heart tumor causes you to turn into a crystal, but it's a step there, right? We're getting closer to being able to understand how these systems function. I think that that part's interesting, but I do think that the whole plot is schlocky and filled with cliches and tropes that make it very predictable.
Yes. The back alley doctor operating on the margins of society with a heart of gold, the hidden past. The I would call this the equivalent of the young kid suffering from cancer. I think it's roughly one to one. The nurse who falls in love with the doctor, the by the books rival physician, always dotting the I's and crossing the lowercase J's. No,
What
other way
did you,
around.
what?
Crossing the T's and dotting the lowercase J's.
In any case, I'm just going to move past your inability to read. Um, I will say that like halfway through the book, once we got to the part where it was clear that the nurse like really wanted Glenn to operate on this kid for something that was related to her past and to his past, I could instantly tell, okay, he killed his girlfriend, she's the sister, and they're going to solve this by the power of friendship. And they kind of did. There is this cockamamie thing where, for the past 10 years, this very cynical back alley doctor, without the resources of a lab or a university library, has been able to do research for 10 years in order to find a cure for this really terrible disease that you'd think more people in the universities at Remiferia would be spending time to fix, especially when it is knowledge, like common knowledge, I would assume in the hospital community, that Glenn found the cause of it a decade ago. Once that happened, once that surgery happened, people know about it. The Rufus knows about it, at least. And so does the hot nurse who comes and finds him. You know, it kind of makes no sense to me that they would not like the act that the medical community would not follow up on that lead. It's a pretty big lead.
It does not make sense. It relies on tropes, on cliches, on melodramatic emotion, and all in all, I don't think this is. I'm not sure if successful is the right word, but it didn't pack, maybe not the word punch, but it wasn't as resonant as the other items that we've read, the other two stories.
Yeah.
It didn't tell us
Well,
anything new about the world. It didn't give us interesting insights into the characters. I thought Cornelia, I thought Toby were much more interesting.
Cornelia was a gripping narrative and it informed us about the Grolls Ritter. The Dull Knight is like introducing us to a folk tale that could have more resonances as we go down the line. Gambler Jack is a look into the seedy underbelly of Calvard. And then this
Gambler Jack
is
was great.
this in terms of like in comparing the four novels, this one comes off like a wet fart.
It does. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, it was great if you just look at A, B, and C or whatever. This was not successful. I think you agree.
I mean, it's not a bad
I
read.
don't understand.
I still liked reading it. I read it this morning. Literally the first thing I did when I woke up because I had a lot of shit I had to do today that I managed to get done. But like it's not a bad read. It's not atrocious. I didn't throw it away. But it's not something I'm going to be thinking about a lot. But I have a question for you, Kev. I have a question for you. Why are you trying to claw me through the camera?
I just moving my hand.
Uh-huh. Um, So the one thing that I think is interesting in terms of discussion with this novel is that it kind of raises a philosophical question of what does it mean to live? Because we're given these two choices. Say that you're a violinist. What a violinist, they're passionate about playing the violin. Not just passionate, though, they're economically dependent on playing the violin. That's how they earn money. And just imagine living through the world without your hands. That's difficult. You know, you can't, it's difficult to eat without your hands. It's difficult to cook without your hands. It's difficult to move around, open doors, anything without your hands. And we don't have any evidence that there's like robot hands or anything like that. So an amputation of your hands is pretty fucking terrible. If you're given the option between just dying or living without your hands, what would you do?
Well, I have to correct the record a tiny bit there, Colin. Not to cast aspersions on poor Hugo, but he was an aspiring 14-year-old violinist, so just keep that in mind, all of
Okay.
us.
But the same works for the ballerina when who is going to cut off her feet. You
She
can't
was
dance
a
without feet.
professional ballerina.
Right. But what I'm saying, the economic point stands.
I think the hands are much more important for daily life than your feet. I would have cut off the feet. I would have done the surgery for the hands.
Interesting. Question for you. You and me, we're kind of reliant on sight. Hearing, I think that I could get away with not having. My life would suck, to be sure. I like music. I like watching movies. I like talking. But without sight, I can't do my job. I can't read. I can't play video games. I can't write, really. Um, I don't, if there was a disease coming in that was going to take that the only way to cure it was to make you permanently blind, I don't know if I would take that.
I would just simply evolve with echolocation.
Man, you are pulling a third game in a trilogy-esque explanation for supernatural phenomenon. It just happens.
So I'm surprised we don't have prosthetics fed by septium injections using septium oil because we can see septium orbital mechanics do a lot of stuff. And I would have thought one of the applications would be movement prosthetics, hook it up, hand wave the stuff. But
I mean, I
one
think that,
thing,
hold on. I want to push back a little bit though, because the study of robotics, at least in the mainstream, is still really in its infancy. Like we're starting to see the Zeiss Central Factory experiment with it with like Tita's stuff. But also like a really good prosthetic, uh, the kind that would give you full functionality is going to be requires you to have connection to neural pathways, right? So that you could actually move it with your brain. And we don't see a whole lot of that kind of precision machinery in with the orbital revolution, at least right now. The society might have access to that kind of technology, but your average Zemurian will not.
yeah, but maybe as a prototype in a really advanced hospital, which Remiferia is said to have.
I mean, it's true that Remiferia is supposed to be at the top end of the line of medical research, which is why it's absurd that the solution for this awful disease was just abandoned for 10 years.
Yeah, you'd think some other physician would want to make a name for themselves by doing apparently a very, very short extension into the work that Glenn did.
I mean, I think that the reason why is because there is a surefire way of solving the problem, which is amputation that saves the life of the patient, whereas this surgery is very delicate and I would guess almost assuredly will kill the patient until you're able to, get practice in it. And if your practice is constantly killing people until you accidentally get better and stop killing them, I could see that being an impediment.
When I was reading, I thought maybe this will connect to Shuichi, Arios' daughter.
You mean
She's
Shizuku?
Shizuku, Arios' daughter. She's long-term debilitating disease, but she's not blind from birth. The blindness seems fairly recent. There's reason to believe that favorable developments are possible, but we don't know how much was Dr. Gunter lying, interestingly enough. So, no, he was not her attending physician. He was not in charge of her treatment. So take that back. I mean, the only like hospital patient that we know that we have met really is Shizuku. So I was looking for connection. I didn't really see them.
Yeah,
This
no.
is from the game she's introduced.
Well, I mean, not every game has a one-to-one connection with its novel. Like Cornelia didn't have much of a connection with Trails in the Sky. It has one with the Ark, right? But also think of Gambler Jack. Gambler Jack has almost nothing to do with SC.
Yeah, uh, Gambler, what you said, the themes and the setting, which is not unimportant, that does become really prominent in the games set in Calvard.
Oh yeah, definitely. But that's also like how many games in the future?
Nine, I
Yeah, it's a lot.
think.
I gotta be honest, dude. I'm struggling to think of interesting things to say about this novel.
What's the purpose behind the novel? Not in universe. Cornelia, if I'm going to assume that what we got is in game, a game compressed. The actual novel that you could buy if you were in Libero would be like 300 pages or so. Cornelia is a heist. It's gangsters, it's the church. I can see why people would buy that. I can see why people would buy Gambler Jack. Seedy, noir, underbelly, revenge, a plot, years in the making, long lost relative. I can see why, the fable of the Dull Knight. I don't get what would be the purpose behind Back Alley Doctor. Is there one? It feels like a soap opera.
Well, I mean, people do like soap operas, and I guess you could say that it's a bit of a redemption story. It's a little bit of romance. It's a little bit of, I guess, in the most technical sense, it's science fiction.
Dear listeners, if you like soap operas, please skip the next 30 seconds of the podcast. Yeah, Colin, people like soap operas. They also like reality TV shows. So, what does that say about their sophisticated palate?
Kevin, you strike me as somebody who watches reality TV shows ironically and hasn't realized that your views of it still show up the same on the ratings.
They only watch one reality TV show, so you are wrong. And I watch it unironically.
What is that reality TV show?
The Great British Bake Off, of course.
Okay, I could see myself getting into like cooking reality shows. Okay, but this is how boring. This is how boring this novel is. I mean, I know that I said it wasn't bad, and it's not bad. It's just there's no real substance to it, to the point that I want to talk more about reality cooking shows than the back alley Dr. Glenn.
This is the first time, I think, for in our direct experience with the game, that we've had an episode where the content, the subject matter from the Kaseki series is bland and trite. And I'm very curious to see what will happen when we get to Hajimari, when we get to Kurotira, because you are very vocal about not liking Kurotira. But other than that, the content's been pretty great. But again, talking about Hajimari and your experience with Kuro 2 over the ostensible subject matter for the episode. So let's just amputate the episode, Colin, and save the podcast.
I mean, it's interesting, 'cause this is not the first time that we've had Trails content that we didn't like. We did not like the Trails in the Sky audio drama. We thought that was ridiculous. And people were surprised that we managed to squeeze 30 minutes out of it or however long that it was. And the reason why we could do that was because we could make fun of it. We could complain about it. Complaining about things can be fun. We've complained a little bit about this novel, but even there's not even that much to complain about. It's just there. Granted, I do think that the crystallization thing is probably really important for understanding the physics of this world, but we're not in a place where we can talk about that. So we're just left with this.
Clean incision, cut off the offending limbs. I'm Kevin. That's Colin. See you next time.
Thanks everybody for listening to this very short podcast. Bye bye.